Hello, Enviro friends. Today we are embracing two main characters of academic writing: problem statement and research objectives. They will empower you to elevate your paper from uncertainty to clarity and purpose. Crafting a compelling problem statement is like setting the compass for your research journey. Identifying a specific issue sharpens your focus and makes your findings meaningful, ensuring that each step you take is relevant and impactful. In our third lesson of Academic Writing and Publishing 101, we dwelled into the exciting world of the introduction section. This is where the heartbeat of your research begins, as we outline the problem statement and lay out the research questions or the objectives. I will wrap up our discussion on the introduction in the next lesson, so stay tuned for the upcoming video. But first, let's talk about problem statement. Think of it as your superhero's mission. Without it, your research doesn't know where it's going. It's like setting off on a road trip without a map. You might get somewhere, but probably not where you want to go. The problem statement is where you clearly explain what problem you are trying to solve and why it matters. It sets the stage for everything else in your paper. This section highlights the urgency of the problem and invites your readers into the conversation, setting the stage for the following discussion. Let's recap. The problem statement identifies an issue that needs addressing, sets the focus of the research, justifies the topic's importance, and lays the foundation for the research questions and objectives. How do you craft a solid problem statement? Let's take a look at the problem statement as it was a simple formula to help you get started. Start with the issue, which is X, you want to address. Then connect it to the consequences, which is Y, of the issue. And finally, finish strong with the impact, Z, of solving this problem. Let me show you an example from a published article. So the example article was published in 2022, and the title is Detection of Microplastics in Human Lung Tissue Using Micro-FTIR Spectroscopy. The mounting concern surrounding airborne microplastics stems from the unknown polymer types, levels of exposure, and consequences of their inhalation. This highlighted in yellow is the our X, the statement of the issue. Then microplastic characteristics such as size, shape, vectors, absorbed pollutants, and pathogens, as well as plastic monomer or additive leaching. So the issue is we as humans can inhale from the air microplastic particles, which is X, and the consequences is these tiny particles can absorb pollutants, pathogens, and can also leach different additives, which is the Y. And these have been highlighted as potential promoters of cytotoxicity, which is our Z, the impact on human health. And there you have it. You have just set up your problem like a pro. Now let's move on to the next big player, the research objective. This is your objective, the sidekick that takes the problem statement to the next level. The problem is the mission, and the research objective is the precise plan to solve it. It's your how are we going to fix this? The objectives are closely tied to the research questions, providing a clear roadmap for tackling these inquiries. This connection helps keep the study on track, ensuring that each objective plays a meaningful role in answering the broader research questions effectively. Let's recap. The objective helps to guide the research process, focusing on the scope and the direction of the investigation. Your research objective needs to be clear, focused, and answerable. If the problem statement is the mission, the objective is the strategy. It's important to keep in mind that the objective should be something that can be assessed, tested, or evaluated through the research process. Therefore, it should be realistic and attainable within the scope of the study. Objectives are typically action verbs that describe what the research intends to do, such as analyzing, comparing, investigating, evaluating, identifying, measuring, and much more. Now we understand what is the problem statement and the research objectives. Let's have a look at our previous example, the detection of microplastic in human lung tissue using micro-FTIR spectroscopy. X was highlighted in yellow. The mounting concern surrounding airborne microplastic stems from the unknown polymer types, levels of exposure, and consequences of their inhalation. The problem was introduced. Microplastic characteristics such as size, shape, vectored, absorbed pollutants and pathogens, as well as plastic monomer or additive leaching, why the consequence, have been highlighted as potential promoters of cytotoxicity. With research, these already have been assessed that these tiny particles can have cytotoxicity on our cells inside the human body. This is our Z. So let's take a look at the significance or the concerns that this article was about, the research questions they ask, and then what are their objectives. So here it says in purple, these concerns highlight the necessity for accurate tissue analysis to understand the potential for these synthetic polymers to penetrate the human respiratory system and cause harm. So the authors define their research objectives, which is this study aims to identify, action verb, microplastic particles present in digested human lung tissue samples, while also accounting for procedural and laboratory blank contamination. Let's talk about common mistakes briefly to avoid them. First, don't make your problem statement too broad. If it's too big, your research objective will be impossible to carry out. It's like trying to solve the word microplastic problem in 15 pages. It's definitely not doable. Second, don't be too vague with your objectives because it can lead to unclear research outcomes. You need a clear, specific objective that you can answer through research. Finally, make sure your problem statement fits your objective. It's all about alignment. Now let's have an example. What would happen if the research objectives would be mismatched and wouldn't be aligned with the problem statement? I'm gonna give you back our previous example and I'm gonna generate a poorly mismatched problem statement and research objectives. So the authors in this article write about the detection of microplastics in human lung tissue using micro-FTIR spectroscopy. In yellow, the authors concerned about the inhalation of microplastic, and then they also stated that microplastics can absorb pollutants, pathogens, even additives are leaching from the microplastics. So we reach to the cytotoxicity concerns, the impact. So their objective was to analyze lung tissue samples if they can find microplastics that can cause harm to humans. A poorly mismatched problem statement and research objective would have been, if the research objective would be, this study aims to determine how various plastic polymers impact the color and the texture of indoor microplastics in densely populated areas. But why this is a poorly mismatched objective with the problem statement? Because the problem statement addressed airborne microplastics, their potential risks, and their effects on human health, specifically regard cytotoxicity and inhalation. In the article, the authors very clearly stated that their aim is also to analyze and identify microplastic particles they are presented in the digested human lung tissues, which is very well aligned with the problem statement. That's all for this lesson. I hope you find today's class content beneficial and the lesson insightful. Please feel free to post your questions and concerns in the comments. I hope to have you in the next lesson where I will finish discussing the introduction section. See you all in the 5th Academic Writing and Publishing 101 lesson.